All right. So we are going to work on the Toy Boat Derby um, pilot honor. So we have several Pathfinders here from the Waukesha Warriors Pathfinder Club and from Waukesha, Wisconsin. And so we're going to introduce everyone. Let's start with the catechins. If you could, Edgar, you could introduce yourself and your daughter and give permission. I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Hi, my name is Edgar Katakutan. I'm the director of Pathfinder Waukesha. Millie is my daughter. I'm giving permission for her to be recorded.
Thank you. How about the Rushford family?
Hi, I'm Sarah Rushford. I'm the mother of Jacob Rushford and Joshua Rushford, right here. And as the mother of both of Jacob and Joshua, I give permission for them to be recorded and used in training other Pathfinder clubs with this honor.
All right, thank you. And then Mary, could you introduce yourself and your children?
My name is Mary Guevara. My children are Logan and Lovely.
Awesome. Okay. And let's go for the Scafidi family. Oop, hang on, let me try it again.
Everyone, my name is Jim Scafidi. I'm Isaiah's dad. You have my permission to record Isaiah as needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And let's go to the Kind family.
Hello, my name is Alan Kind. I'm the father of Braden and Owen Kind. I do give permission to have them photographed and recorded as needed.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So parents can leave if you got other things to do, but you're welcome to stick around too. So the whole idea is that this is a proposed honor. It's not an official honor yet. I want to share my screen. Let's see. Here we go. It's a proposed honor that hasn't been officially accepted yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to what they call pilot the honor. So I am actually getting quotes on purchasing patches. The patch will look something like this. Can you all see that?
Yes.
So the patch is going to be the same height and same width as a normal patch, but instead of oval shape, there'll be this diamond shape to indicate that it's not officially an honor yet. So if this were to go through the complete process and become an honor, then they would, one, change the look of the patch and possibly change some of the requirements. So just wanted to let you know that that's where we are in the whole process. So this is called the Toy Boat Derby honor. If you can imagine something like the Pinewood Derby honor, only this has to deal with boats and involves actually a lot more physics and those kinds of things. So I hope you enjoy it. Everyone has the worksheet. Give me a thumbs up. Oh, you know something I didn't do? I got all the parents' permission. Let's see. Let me unmute everybody. But I didn't get the kids' permission. So kids, if you are willing to be a guinea pig, let me try to unmute. Show your approval by voting. Squeal like a guinea pig. Okay, looks like everybody's squealing, so we have your permission. That's good to know. Okay. All right. We'll see how this goes. I'll try not to mute people more than I have to. Okay. So let's back up. Okay, first thing on your worksheet that you see there, it says a wind-powered boat diagram. So I'm asking you to draw a picture of a boat. Let me draw a picture of a boat and label it. So you can do a sailboat or you can do any kind of boat that you want, a wind-powered boat. And I want to talk to you about the differences that we see here. So if you can see my screen, the boat part, what I would call the boat part, is a hull. So if you can imagine a canoe is basically a hull and a hull only. But a boat will have some sort of hologram around it. In addition, you will have some sort of a mast. So you'll have some kind of a pole that the sail is going to hang off of. And at the bottom of that, you will see a large something called a boom. So the main sail is generally tied between the mast and the boom. So they can turn that around as the wind is needed to help catch the wind, however the sailor needs to participate. Has anybody ever been, I'm gonna see if I can show everybody. Has anybody ever been on a real sailboat?
Yes.
Kinds have been? Oop, let's unmute you here. Kinds have been on a real sailboat?
Yep.
I have, the boys have not.
Okay. So I have not. I have lots of friends who sail sailboat. Sounds like a pretty complicated, you have to really understand what you're doing, because I would imagine I would get out there at the sailboat, the wind would hit me, and I would probably be spinning around in circles. It's pretty complicated when you see how people sail with sailboats. So in addition to the main sail, there's something called a jib. So a jib are generally the triangular sails that you see on the front of a sailboat. And so the combination of the main sail and the jib, they can arrange those in such a way to catch the wind just how they want that will propel the boat. It still amazes me how they can catch wind that's blowing straight at them and it can propel them forward. But they can figure out how to do that. They can do that for a couple reasons. One, at the bottom, you see that there's a keel or some sort of a keel on the bottom of the boat. So some sailboats, they can raise and lower those keels as they need to. So the keel is on the bottom of the hull. You've got a rudder that can help steer the boat, and a tiller, something that somehow allows you to steer the rudder. So if you draw your picture, hopefully your boat, you see a hull, and you can, on your worksheet, you can see the name hull. So just draw a line from hull to the part of the boat that you're looking at. While you're still finishing that, in case you're not crazy about this kind of boat, I'm going to show you a different kind of boat that you could also draw. You remember these boats, the old-fashioned boats?
Yeah.
They basically had the same kind of parts on them. So there's a hull. You see the hull down here. It's basically the main part of the boat. You've got these old boats had sometimes 2, sometimes 3 different kinds of mast. So there's a main mast and foremast, and some of them had a rear mast. And so the sail hanging off of the mast would be called the mainsail, just like the sailboats I just showed you. These triangular mast up front are called the jib sails, just like they do on modern sailboats. At the bottom of the sails, they have these booms, just like they do on modern sailboats. At the bottom of the hull, there's a keel. So this keel looks a little bit different, but it serves the same purpose. It keeps the boat going in a somewhat straight direction. It's kind of a area at the bottom that, you know, once it starts moving, it tends to move in that direction. Otherwise, it might blow sideways. And then at the back of the boat, there's a rudder that helps steer the boat. And then what's not shown here, which I'm showing, is a tiller. So, you know, that's the old captain up here. He's steering the boat, but he's basically adjusting the tiller. So if you look at this picture and the last picture, they look like different boats, but there's really the same kind of pictures. So did everybody get a boat drawn? And I can wait a few minutes.
Yeah,
So,
if you don't mind, wait a few minutes.
yeah, no, that's so there's a hull. You know, just draw a picture. It doesn't have to be a pretty hull, but a hull is the main part of the boat. And at the bottom of the hull, you'll see some kind of a keel. So, and in the back of the boat, you'll see a rudder and some sort of a tiller that will help you move the rudder. And then for the sails part, you come off of a big mast and a jib and a mainsail. So let me move this over, and there's another picture in case this helps you. So here's another picture of a sailboat. You know, here's the number 4 would be, what's it called?
Hull.
To be the hull. What would 5 be called?
Keel.
The keel. What would 6 be called?
Rudder.
The rudder. And I didn't label it, but what would this part up here be?
Tiller.
The tiller, yeah. What's this triangular sail in the front called?
Jib.
Jib.
Jib. And the big mainsail was called what?
A mainsail.
Mainsail. And what's this part?
A boom.
The boom. So does that label all your parts? You got a boom, you got a hull, you got a jib, you got a keel, you got a mainsail, you got a mast, and you got a rudder.
Oh, look at that.
Okay. If you guys are still drawing, give me a little high sign. Give me a wave.
Yeah, just maybe like 30 seconds still.
Sure. Yep. We'll wait. We're not in a hurry. We got all morning.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. All right. So the next part of the honor, we're going to talk about rubber band boats. Now, rubber band boats, they don't have a lot of things that sailboats do. They have some similar parts, but for the most part, a toy rubber band boat, let me scratch this out,
Is my pen right there?
really has some way for rubber bands to be connected to the hull. Couldn't think of the hull. So you got a hull. So here's my rubber band boat, and you guys can draw a schematic of however you want to do it. And you don't need to do this right now. You can think about it, because I'm going to ask you to design a rubber band boat of your own. And I'm going to show you what I did, but there are lots of YouTube videos. There's lots of internet places that you can do, or you can even play with it. But once you come up with a design, then I want you to do a design of your own. So we're not going to draw it right now, and they can be very simple. So for example, here's a soda bottle I just took. I'm not encouraging you to drink soda, but you can probably go outside and pick one up somewhere off the main road, or look in somebody's trash. I'm sure you could find a soda bottle or even a water bottle. We'll say it that way.
T-Rex.
And then what I did was I glued two popsicle sticks on the back end. I took, I don't know how well you can see this, but I just took a plastic lid. I took two of these, and I cut out rectangles in the middle. And then I took those two rectangles, I slid each one about halfway in the middle, right there, and I fit them together. And then I had to glue them because they kept wanting to collapse on me, but I wound up with this kind of thing. Does everybody see what I'm looking at?
Glenn, could you go full screen on yourself? Right now, you're really tiny. Could you go full
Okay.
screen?
How do I do that? I will. Let me figure this out.
I think if you stop screen sharing.
That's as big as I can make myself.
Go to your next
That's as big as I can make me on my end. Can you see that now? Is that better? So I took two pieces, rectangle pieces, and I sliced them in the middle. But again, I would encourage you guys to go to YouTube and there are some really, really cool designs out there, but I want to show you how simple it can be. I just took two pieces of scrap plastic, cut them in rectangles, sliced them halfway in the middle where they could fit together, basically fit together like that. And once they fit together, then I have just a soda bottle, and I glued a couple of popsicle sticks on the end. So you've got all week to figure out how you want to do your rubber band boat. So then I took a rubber band and I put it in the middle like that, and I stretched it around. Like this. So I can, now that it's back there, I can rotate it and then let go, and they spin like that. So this is a very, very simple one. So the purpose I wanted to show you is that you don't have to spend any money at all to do this. Remember on the Pinewood Derby, you had to buy the kits, and then a lot of you spent a lot of extra money for special weights and special wheels and special grease and all that kind of stuff. The point is, a rubber band boat you can basically not spend any money at all and do rubber band boat. However, you can get really fancy if you should desire. So everybody understand the concept of it? You don't need to design it right now, but think about what kind of rubber band boat you would like to do and draw a design on the front of your page. Everybody understand what I'm asking you to do?
Mhm.
Okay. So to understand boats, and maybe this will help you when you design your boat. Let me minimize this here. Okay, we're going to learn about Archimedes. Archimedes is a guy, if you haven't heard of Archimedes before, he's probably somebody you should learn about, because he will pop up later on in your school life. He was born around 287 BC. That means when Jesus was going through school, he probably learned about Archimedes. That's how far back he goes. He was a couple hundred years before Christ, almost 300 years before Christ. And so all of his math that he came up with, I'm sure was taught in Jerusalem, and Jesus and his disciples probably learned it when they were in school. But Archimedes was a Greek guy. He wasn't Roman. So he was Greek. His dad was an astronomer. So he wasn't an astronomer, but his dad was. So I'm sure he knew a lot about astronomy. A lot of the early guys were into astronomy. And he actually studied underneath a very famous mathematician called Euclid. So when you get older and you start, when you take geometry in high school, you're going to learn about Euclid geometry. Well, Euclid was actually Archimedes' teacher. So that's how, they were there together. So they knew each other, and they learned off of each other, I'm sure. A lot of people call Archimedes the greatest mathematician ever. I put that in quote because not everybody agrees, but a lot of people can make a case that Archimedes is the best mathematician that's ever lived. A lot of them also call Archimedes the greatest physicist. So I'm not so sure that everyone agrees with that, but you can make the case that he was that smart. This is how important this guy was. He was an engineer. I didn't see any references that called him the greatest engineer, but he was an engineer. And one of my favorite quotes that I always remember when I was starting to learn physics was, he said, he's the guy who came up with the phrase, he says, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." He basically said that if you have a big enough lever, you can move anything you want. So the reason why we're going to talk about Archimedes is because of this concept here. There's a story about Archimedes where, as the story goes, the king had a crown made for him. It was solid gold, and the king wasn't really sure to know if he got cheated or not. So he put this puzzle out there and goes, without tearing the crown apart, can you tell me if I got cheated when or did whoever make the crown use some use some cheap metals on the inside and then just covered it in gold. He didn't know if it's solid gold or gold plated. So Archimedes thought about it. He thought about it. And the story goes is that one day Archimedes sat in a bathtub. And when he sat in the bathtub, he noticed that the water rose. And so he was said to have yelled, "Eureka!" And he apparently jumped out of the bathtub, ran down the street. "Eureka, Eureka, I got it, I figured it out." And he's naked. He's running down the street, and everybody thought he was crazy. I don't know if that story's true or not, but it's a good story. And what he figured out is that the volume of something, when you put it in water, displaces that same amount of water. So even though a crown has a funny shape and you really can't measure, the length, the width, and the height, and you can't accurately measure it, you can put it in water and you can see how much water gets displaced. And that tells you the volume of whatever you're looking at. And then he went one step further and he looked at the weight of the crown in water, what we call the relative weight, the unit weight. When you compare that to other weights, he's able to figure out that indeed the king got fooled. It wasn't a real gold crown. So how that affects boats. water, and it varies a little bit depending on pressure, on temperature, and how clean the water is. But for the most part, water weighs 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. And Archimedes came up with this principle. Here's the principle, and I'm gonna read it to you, and then we're gonna see if any of you can maybe paraphrase it for the rest of us. So the Archimedes principle of buoyancy says an upward buoyant force that is exerted on a body immersed in a fluid, whether fully or partially submerged, is equal to the weight of the fluid that the body displaces. So in essence, what this means is that if you have, in this case, a glass cube, so we say a cubic foot. If it's 12 inches long by 12 inches wide by 12 inches high, imagine a glass cube. If that cube were to weigh exactly 62.4 pounds, then if you put it in water, it would stay exactly where it's at. It wouldn't go up, it wouldn't go down. If it weighs exactly the same as the water that it displaces. If that glass cube were to weigh more than 62.4 pounds, it would actually sink. If it would weigh less than 62.4 pounds, what happens? It goes up. So when it goes up, and depending how much it floats is depending on how much water it displaces. So for example, if it only weighed 31.2, so half of the cube would be above water and half would be below water. Okay, so now that I've said that, let's see if some of you smart kids, and all of you are smart, let's see if some of you can figure out if there's a good way to paraphrase Archimedes' principle of buoyancy. Who wants to take a stab at it? Any volunteers? Jacob. Oop, let me unmute you, Jacob. Go ahead, Jacob. Oop. Something happened here. What do you think, Jacob? How would you paraphrase Archimedes' principle?
I would say that if the cube weigh more water than it weighs, then it goes up. But if it doesn't push away enough water to equal its weight, then it goes down.
Okay, well, that's a good paraphrase. I don't think you shortened it any. Anybody else have an idea? What about Isaiah or Amelia? How would you simplify Archimedes' principle of buoyancy?
If something's lighter than 62 pounds, it floats. If it's heavier than 62 pounds, it sinks.
Okay, so if something is heavier than the water it displaces, it would sink.
Yeah.
If it's lighter than the water it displaces, it would get pushed up. Okay? Everybody understand that? It's kind of a complicated principle, but so basically what it's saying is that if I had a boat that didn't weigh anything, how much of it would be underwater?
0%.
Zero. Yeah. And if I had a boat that was exactly 1 cubic feet and it weighed 62.4 pounds, what would happen to it?
It'd be 100% submerged.
It would stay wherever you put it. Yeah, in the water.
Sink.
It wouldn't rise, but the minute that the displaced volume is lighter than the volume it's taking up, it would get pushed up. The minute it gets heavier, it gets pushed down. So let's talk about what that means for boats. So I want to pull you guys down. So here's a picture of what this means for boats. So when you look at a boat, some of the boat is below the water and some of the boat's above water. And so what happens is you look at the area that's below the water, and if you were to compute that area, multiply it by 62.4 pounds, That's how much the entire boat weighs. So to look at a great big ocean liner that carries all this freight back and forth from China and Europe and wherever else that it might go to, the reason why they can carry so much weight is because they're so big and they take up a lot of room. So it's just a matter of how much area that they take up versus what. Okay, everybody understand that? Anybody have any questions? Logan looks like he's got it.
All good.
Okay, so the whole point is that we want to figure out how much volume is being consumed by the boat, and then however many cubic feet, we multiply that by 62.4, and that's how much the boat actually weighs. So if you weigh a boat down, what would happen to the boat? If you put more cargo on the boat, what would happen? It would sink, yeah. So if you put more cargo on a boat, it actually goes down. When you unload a boat, the boat would rise back up. So boats will compensate a lot of times by adding water to make sure that they stay on the same spot. So they may get rid of a bunch of cargo, but then they add a bunch of water to help fill up the boat so that it can stay in the same spot. Otherwise, you would see empty boats almost flying on top of the water, and that's not really how they're made to float. Okay? So, in addition to Archimedes, we're going to learn about Newton. Let me see if I can diminish this here. Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. So Isaac Newton was born in 1642. So quite a bit of time after Christ. This was after Columbus discovered America, and so people are over here and they're trying to form a country. Back in England, there's this guy, Isaac Newton, and he was a mathematician, and some people call him the greatest mathematician ever. He was also a really cool physicist. He was an astronomer, and most importantly, or at least I think so, is he was a theologian. He really loved Christ. He loved God so much.
Mom gave it to me to work.
He was an author, and I say author because he wrote a little bit about his physics, but most of his writing he spent about religion. He was very much in love with Christ, and the reason why I want to point that out is because many people say that he started the science revolution. And nowadays, people will say, well, you can't really be a scientist and be a Christian, but yet they love Newton's laws because Newton has a lot of laws that we still use today. He thought of a lot of things, and so that's in essence not true. They're just saying that because Sir Isaac Newton was definitely very much in love with Christ, and he came up with a lot of physics laws that we still use today. So there's a story about Newton, and this is probably more fable than the Archimedes story, but it said that an apple fell out of his tree and hit him on the head, and that's when he thought about gravity. So that's probably more of a fable, but he had 3 laws of motion, and we're going to talk about 2 of them. The first law of motion is this. It says, an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted on by an unbalanced force. And an object in motion will continue with constant speed and direction unless acted on by an unbalanced force. So basically, let's describe this. So in this picture that you see here, there's a soccer ball. What happens to the soccer ball if nothing touches it? Nothing, right. So unless something acts on something else, it's just going to sit there. There's nothing that it's going to happen to it. So when a foot kicks a soccer ball, that's an unbalanced force. So an object at rest remains at rest until you do something to it. So when you kick it, it's going to move. But not until you kick it or drop it or do something else to it, it's not going to move because things don't move on their own. So, but now when it moves, the second part of this law says that Once it's in motion, it will continue at the constant speed and direction. It's not going to change unless something else acts upon it. So when you kick a soccer ball, what acts on that soccer ball?
Gravity.
Gravity. So if gravity weren't here pulling it to the earth, it would continue at whatever direction that you kick it. It also has wind that acts as friction on the soccer ball. So the friction is going to slow it down. And in the case of a soccer ball, hopefully you hit the net. So when it finally hits the net, then the net is going to keep it from continuing where it's supposed to go. So I think it's important. I'm going to stop here. Does everybody understand the first law? So the first law says an object in motion stays in motion unless, an object at rest stays at rest, or an object in motion stays in motion unless something else acts upon it. Everybody understand? So if you went in space and kicked a soccer ball where there was no gravity and no friction and no spaceship for it to bump into, and you kicked that soccer ball and you kicked it at 100 miles an hour, it would stay at 100 miles an hour until it did encounter gravity or friction or a space station or something like that that it bumped into. Okay? But if you went up in space and just put a soccer ball in one spot, it would stay in one spot until you tapped it or you did something to it to set it in motion. Everybody understand the first law?
Yes.
All right. So now let's talk about how that applies to a sailboat. Here is a sailboat. So what puts a sailboat in motion?
Wind.
Wind. What if the sailboat did not have wind? It would stay right where it's at. So the Newton's first law says that unless you start pushing on something, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to stay in one spot. So why would a sailboat, so once you start pushing on a sailboat with wind, what would stop a sailboat?
An iceberg?
Yeah, it could be an iceberg, could be the beach, could be friction of the water, could be the wind blowing in the opposite direction. Something has to stop that boat, otherwise it would continue sailing forever. So that's generally what happens is there's friction in the water, winds that blow against it, or maybe it runs on the shore, or maybe hits another boat. Hopefully not. But so this is how Newton's first law affects a boat. So it sits by itself until you do something. You either blow into it, or you start up a motor, or something else pushes it. And once you start pushing it, it will continue to go forever until something else interacts with it. Okay? Everybody understand that concept? Give me a thumbs up. All right. How about the Rushford kids? There you go. You got me, Joshua? All right. So let's go to the next. So just another picture of a wind. So this is, I told you earlier that a sailboat is very, very complicated as far as understanding how the winds, how you can affect it. So the upper left that you see there is a picture of a toy sailboat. So the wind, so you can make a sailboat go faster by adding more wind, or maybe a bigger sail to catch the wind that you do have. And once it starts in motion, it will continue in motion. Now, a real sailboat, it still amazes me how they can basically sail right into the wind, headstrong into the wind. And they do that because they use the keel, they use the jib sail, they use the mainsail, and all to their advantage. And all those forces balance out, and the resulting force moves you straight ahead, which is pretty amazing. And it's probably a little bit beyond this honor, but it is important to understand that's how that works. Okay? So as far as rubber band, we're going to talk about potential and kinetic energies. So a potential energy means that, let's see, so has everybody, and I don't have to see a picture of you, so you have to let me know. Does everybody do number 3, describe the Archimedes principle of buoyancy? Say no if you didn't.
No, I didn't have that.
Somebody doesn't have that? We'll back up then. Who said that? Logan?
Josh did.
Who did? Joshua?
Josh.
Okay. So the principle of buoyancy basically says anything lighter than the volume of water it displaces will get pushed up. That's probably a good paraphrase. If it's lighter than the water that it displaces, it floats. Is that a simple enough explanation? You got that, Logan?
The water
Right.
displaces.
So if it's lighter than the volume of water it displaces, it floats.
Oh,
Okay?
okay. Yeah.
All right. So how about Newton's first law of motion? Did everybody get that one?
Yep.
First law of motion? Okay. What about Newton's third law? Did we go over that? Did we skip over that?
Slide. Yeah,
We did slide.
In the here?
Where we at? Yeah. Oh, we skipped right over third law of motion. I'm sorry. Okay, let me explain the third law of motion. I'm glad I checked. Move you around here. Newton's third law of motion says that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if I were to push against the wall, no matter how hard I push on it, if that wall doesn't move, it is pushing back in the same amount of force that I'm pushing into it. Okay? What would happen if the wall didn't push back as hard as I pushed on the wall? What would happen?
Folks, you look like the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah, I look like the Kool-Aid man. I would go through the wall because the wall couldn't resist all the forces I'm pushing on it. So here's a picture of somebody in a canoe. So they're adding a force in one direction, and unlike a wall that is solid, the other forces aren't that strong. So what happens? I push through it, and so it puts me in a forward motion. If I were to push with say an oar as hard as I could and the boat didn't move, that would mean that all the forces like the gravity, the wind, maybe I'm up against a wall or a rock, that would keep me from moving forward. So that's the third law of motion. It's a lot simpler to say, but it's a little bit more complicated in its idea. Everybody write that? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Sometimes that's just a solid force like a wall, or sometimes that force gets turned into motion and you use up that energy in a motion. Does everybody understand this one? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Everybody got that? I think Josh was still writing. How you doing, Joshua?
I finished it.
You finished it? Jacob's got it? Logan, Jorgen, everybody?
Yep.
Awesome. Kinds? All right. So for every action, there's equal and opposite reactions. So that's how, then I went over to talk about the sailboats, how every action, there's somehow that force has to be redirected. And when that force gets redirected with the sailboat, because of the angles and of the sails and the length and the space of the jib and the keel and everything else, that's what drives a boat forward. Okay. Now we're going to talk about potential versus kinetic energy. And I promise this is hopefully will start making sense here in a little bit. So the potential energy. So a potential energy, we understood that basically nothing happens to it unless something else moves, right? That's what Newton said. So what happens if it moves because of its relative position to something else? So potential energy says energy is there because of its potential, or I'm sorry, because of its position to something else. So for example, a rock sitting on the ground is not going to do anything. But if you pushed a rock off of a cliff, Now it's going to fall because it has some place, you know, it's higher than something else. So that's called potential energy. So, and here's the other example. If you have a spring and you push down on it, but you keep your hand on it, it's not moving, but it's got a lot of potential ready to be used, right? It's just stored right there. It's ready to be used, but it's not being used until you move your hand away. And the rock that you see there has potential energy, but it's not going to be used until you actually take the cliff away from it, and then it would fall. So that's what we call potential energy. Now, kinetic energy, I tried to describe. Has everybody seen these toys where you have the marbles and they go back and forth? Well, what happens is when I lift that ball up on its side and I hold it up in the air, it has potential energy. Then when I let go of it, as it's moving, we call that kinetic energy. So kinetic energy is energy that we have because it's moving. It has its motion. So a baseball, if I hold a baseball up here, it may have potential energy because it could drop, but it has no other energy unless I throw it, and then it has motion, and that motion, when it hits something, will cause something to happen. So that's the energy. That's kinetic energy. So how does that apply to boats? Oops, let's go to one more example, in case you didn't understand that. So here's an example of potential versus kinetic energy. If I were to put a marble on top of a hill, it has all potential energy and no kinetic energy. Why is that? Right, it's not moving. So once it starts moving and it actually hits the bottom of the hill, so it has no more potential energy because it can't drop, but it still has energy. What kind of energy did it turn into? Kinetic energy, right. So if it has energy because of its relative position, it's called potential. If it has energy because it's moving, it's called kinetic energy. I started to say kinetic like the water place. If it's rolling down the hill, it has both potential and kinetic energy. So here's another example just to illustrate the point. So a bow and arrow. So if I were to pull back on a bow and hold it right there, that's called potential energy because it's all there. It's ready to go, but I haven't sprung it loose yet. But once I turn it loose and the arrow starts flying, it becomes kinetic energy. So to take this one step further, we have a rubber band. And rubber band has a special kind of potential and kinetic energy. It's called elastic energy. So when I pull back on a rubber band, is that potential energy or kinetic energy?
Potential.
Potential energy, because it's where it is relative position. It's ready to move, but it hasn't started moving yet. What happens when it starts moving? When I let go of the rubber band, it turns into kinetic energy, right? Kinetic. So when I take a rubber band, so let me see if I can blow me up again.
I think you have to stop screen sharing because your screen takes up the majority of the screen.
Why write this down?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So let me stop.
And then if you mute everybody else and turn it into speaker mode, you should be the biggest.
Okay. Let me stop screen sharing. Stop share. All right. So everybody sees me now? Okay. So this is my rubber band boat. And you guys are going to probably come up with one that's a lot cooler than this one. So I have rubber band here. And I'm going to start winding it. So without touching it right now, does my rubber band have potential energy or kinetic energy?
Potential.
Potential.
No, nothing. It's just sitting there.
Oh, right, because you
Nothing,
didn't
it's not
wind it.
wound up.
Yeah, there's nothing going on. So now if I wind up my rubber
Then it's
band and then I hold it, now it's got potential energy, right?
Yeah.
It's ready to just spring loose. And as I turn loose, what's happening? It turned into, yeah, it turned into kinetic energy, which hopefully if it works right, it's actually going to propel my boat and go forward. Okay, and as my boat goes forward, then my boat turns into, it has what kind of energy? Kinetic energy, because it'll be moving. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can do this now. I want to turn this on. Okay, can you guys, let's see, find my, here we go. Can you guys see this video right here with my fingers?
No,
You can't see that, okay.
I don't see your fingers.
All right, let me see if I can figure this out. Let's see if I can mute me. Now can you see my fingers?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Turn down the volume on your original computer because it's causing back.
Okay.
It sounds cool though.
It's going
Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I see.
I want to show you what you guys are going to be working on this week. And let me see if I can turn it around. Switch camera. Okay. Yeah, guys, can you guys see me now?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to show you, this is the tracks that we're going to have. Oops. What I've done is I have gone out to Menards or Home Depot or somewhere. I got these at Home Depot actually. And these are guttering sections. And they're called 4-inch gutters, but they're not actually 4 inches. Actually, they're 5-inch gutters. Take it back. They're called 5-inch gutters, and they measure just over 4 inches. So I'm actually going to change the description in my written description to show you. Your boat has to be able to fit inside this gutter. So again, I'm going to measure it. Looks like it is just over 4 inches, almost 4.5 inches wide. And this guttering section, which is how we're going to race all of our boats, is one section, but I think of Wakanda, I'm actually going to make it 2 sections long. And we'll put them side by side, and maybe we'll have more than 2 tracks. But this is how we're going to set this up. I got a towel here because I had a little bit of a leak. Don't tell my wife. So when you guys see Alcione, thank her for allowing me to get a little bit of water in the living room. But this is what the tracks look like. And so what I'm going to do, you're going to do 2 kinds of boats. You're going to have a wind-powered boat, and I want to show you how simple these boats can be. So what I did was I took this one is a whipping cream container, but when you guys get to go back to school in the lunchroom, you probably can find something similar. But again, look in your trash. You could probably find almost anything. And I cut this in half, and then I took the part that I cut off and cut a little bit more, and I made a little sail. And so what can happen is, then we're going to take a straw. Let me see if I can. And we'll make sure that everybody has the same size straw. And then we'll get down, and you can blow. And we'll race them that way. So everybody will have the same kind of straw, and we'll have the same area. Now, so I have a question for you. With my boat that I made here, what are some problems you see with it?
Made of paper.
Okay, well, it's made of paper. That's not necessarily a problem. I guess it'd be a problem if I wanted to use it for a long time. What are some other problems with it? What does it not have that most sailboats have? Remember your picture?
A rudder.
A rudder.
Doesn't have a rudder. So since it doesn't have a rudder, what do you think? What problems would you have with that?
It won't move.
Can't steer it.
Yeah, it'll be tougher to control. And once it starts floating, it can float sideways as easy as it can float forward, right? So maybe if I were to add a rudder to it and I start blowing on it, it might stay straighter. What else do you see that this doesn't have that most boats would have?
Pictures.
What's that?
The pictures.
Doesn't have pictures?
No. The picture. It doesn't have pictures on those.
When you look back at your picture of a sailboat, what things are on a sailboat that this doesn't have?
It doesn't have the adjustable sail that it should have.
Yeah, it doesn't have adjustable sails. So if I were to make a toy boat with adjustable sails, that would enable you to go different directions, right? Or imagine so as of now, I have to get right behind it to blow for it to go straight. Because if I were off to the side, it would blow into the wall, right? So if I knew that I could adjust the sail, I could adjust it sideways, I could blow on it from the side and it would go straight. Okay, what else would a sailboat have that my little boat does not have?
Keel.
Jib.
Yeah, it doesn't have a keel. We talked about that.
A jib.
Jib sails. So notice how I made this. I just stapled each side, so I can't adjust the sails. Although I guess I could have when I made it, but I didn't. Make it that way.
Boom.
What's that?
There's no boom.
There's no boom. Yeah, so a boom would have allowed it to turn this way and that way, and it doesn't have that. It doesn't have a rudder or some of those
It doesn't have a
kinds.
mast.
Well, I would continue that maybe this is the mast, or at least it's a sail. So you'd have to look how to do that. So I want you to remember the pictures of your boat that you drew earlier in the honor. So when you're looking at how to make your own sailboat, you can incorporate as many of those features as you can. It doesn't have to have them, like my little boat doesn't have to have them. But if you could add some of those features, your boat may be quite a bit better than what I have here. So when you blow on it as a race, that's how you would. Otherwise, if you rub up against the side of the track, what would happen?
Friction.
It's friction, and that's part of the thing. So, and you notice I have these little clips here on the side. So if it were to bump into the clip and stop, that's Newton's what law? The first law or the third law?
First law.
First law.
First law, yeah. So if I can keep it from bumping into other stuff, the faster it's going to go. And I'm going to keep my potential and kinetic energy. I should say kinetic energy. Okay? So first assignment before next week, you guys need to come up with your own boat. And I'm going to look at them next week when we meet together. And I'm interested to see what kinds of toy boats you came up with. So one is a sailboat. You need to come up with some kind of a sailboat. And we're going to race them with a track like this, probably two of them, one after the other, but my living room's not long enough. And race them, and we'll have a race, okay? The other thing you're going to make is a rubber band powered boat. Now, likewise, what kind of problems do you think I'm going to have with this rubber band powered boat?
There's no rudder.
See if you can speculate. Yeah, there's no rudder. So what's going to happen to it?
If it veers off into a direction, it's staying.
Okay. So it'll veer off. It won't go in a straight direction.
Yeah. And
What other kind of problems do you see with my boat? What other kind of problems? Let me show you what going to wind up with. Let me see if I can put this down here. I'm going to wind this up. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put this down. It doesn't flow very easily, does it?
No.
It's getting caught on the side. Even when it does rotate through, it tends to turn on its side. It tends to turn over. So I'm going to have to somehow add some weight to the bottom of it to make sure it doesn't try to tip over, because it doesn't go very well that direction.
A keel.
Yeah, it needs a keel. Needs some weight in the bottom.
Marble.
Oops, I lost you guys there.
Some marbles or rocks in the can.
Okay.
Con.
So what else could I put on my boat to make it perform better?
One of you boys say, can I put some marbles or rocks in the soda bottle so it acts as a keel?
Hey, can we put marbles or rocks in the boat so it can act as a keel?
Sure. Now the thing is, you have to worry about weighting your boat down too much, because what would happen if you weight your boat down?
Then it will sink. Oh.
Yeah, Archimedes' principle says it would start to sink and get lower in the water. So you could even just add water and it would make the boat heavier. I could change out rubber bands. I could put a big fat rubber band. I could put a long skinny rubber band.
Wind it more.
Yeah, I could wind it more. Yeah, there's lots of things I could do to change it. So I want you guys to, and again, I encourage you to get on YouTube or some other internet sites and look for different styles of rubber band boats. Find one you like and draw a design for your boat and make it. And so when we get together, again, we'll have 2 of these tracks together. So it'll be more than just 10 foot, it might be 20 foot long. So you'll want to go the entire distance from one end to the other, and you'll want it to go fast. So I could put a short, fat rubber band on it, and it wouldn't go very far, but it might go really fast, which is okay if it goes really fast and then glides the rest of the way, because that would be using its kinetic energy. Okay?
I have a question about the gutters.
Yeah.
How deep are they? With,
Okay.
The water.
Well, keep in mind that mine will be they will be a little bit deeper when we do this for real. But so the gutters are 3.5 inches deep, but keep in mind that you have a side over here that's kind of slanted.
All right.
So it's about 3.5 inches deep. They won't be completely full of water, because I found out that when you add water, it tends to slosh back and forth, and you will lose water if you just because of the wave motion. So they can't be exactly full, but they can get them pretty full.
Glenn, can you tell us one more time, what's the maximum width on the boat?
Okay. So the maximum width, I would say 4 inches is the maximum. I'm going to change the description to talk about the width of the track, but 4 inches is probably the widest you want to be. Okay? And 3 inches would be ideal, probably 3.5 inches. But I can't wait till this whole virus thing is over. We can get together, and we're gonna put these up somewhere at church, and we're going to get together and we're going to have a big boat derby. Okay? Any questions about anything for the basic honor? Let me get back on here. So your worksheet has several things on it related to the boat.
Where's the worksheet?
We have number 3 was describe Archimedes' principle of buoyancy. I think everybody did that one. We have Newton's first law of motion. I think everyone did that. We have the Newton's third law of motion. I think everybody got that one. Everybody knows what potential energy. So when does a rubber band have potential energy?
When it's fully wound.
When it's wound up. And when does rubber band have kinetic energy?
When you let go of the rubber band and let it get into motion and spin the and let it spin the rudder.
So number 7 is you can check those boxes off once you have made a wind boat and once you have made a rubber band boat. And then when we all get together, you can check off number 8 and 9 because we're going to race our rubber band boats and our wind boats. And the last things we want to talk about is Bible story. I think it's very important for honors to have a spiritual component to them. Let me see if I can. So the question is, now that you know what the Archimedes buoyancy principle is, can you have at least 2 stories in the Bible where it talks about Archimedes floating objects?
Moses.
So
Yeah.
explain the Moses story. What do you mean by Moses? Who said that, Jacob?
That was Owen who said that.
Yeah.
Owen. Okay, Owen.
When he was
Tell us about how Moses.
When he was in the basket. When he was in the basket.
Okay. So Moses was a baby. We could ask Logan and Jorgen how much a baby weighs. How much does a baby weigh?
Like 6 to 8 pounds.
6 to 8 pounds. So maybe Moses was a few weeks old, so maybe he might have been 10 to 15 pounds. So how big would the boat have needed to be for Moses to float in the boat?
About, it had to be,
Well, doesn't it depend on the volume of the boat?
Yeah. So if Moses weighed, say, 10 pounds, that's roughly 1/6 of a cubic foot, right? So the boat would have had to take up at least 1/6 of a cubic foot. And if the boat took up more than that, then Moses would rise higher in the Nile. If it weighed exactly 1/6 of a cubic foot, he would have basically almost been submerged. And that would not have been good. Okay, what's another Bible story where we talk about floating objects?
Jonah.
Jonah.
Yeah, because
So,
when he runs away, he gets on a boat.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the boat almost crashed. Why did the boat almost crash? Jonah's boat almost crashed.
Because it was over.
Because there was like rough seas.
It was in rough seas. Now, if the boat had not broken apart, and I assume it did not break apart because it acted just fine later, but what was the concern about being in rough seas and the boat sinking? How would that happen?
They thought it was too
Take
heavy.
on water.
Yeah, it would take on water. So if the waves crashed over the boat, so if the volume is taken up, if it fills up with water, what's going to happen to the boat? It's going to go down, 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 right? So a boat works because it has open space on the inside, but if the boat is full of water, the boat's going to sink. Do you guys want to mention any other stories where it talks about floating objects?
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark. So that's part of the advanced honor. We're going to talk about actually computing how much cargo and how heavy the boat could have been based on the size of the boat. So the boat is really, really big, takes up a lot of room, and therefore it was able to carry a lot of cargo, all the animals and all the food and everything that the ark needed. Now let's talk about 2 Bible stories where the Archimedes principle of buoyancy.
Hey, Glenn, can I add something?
What's that?
Can I add something?
Sure.
So, about a year ago, we went to visit the Art Museum, and you know, when you read the book, you just kind of have an idea what it sounds like. But when you're actually there, you can kind of figure out how big is the Noah's Ark. You know, I'm talking about the one in
Kentucky.
Kentucky. So I would just recommend to kind of get a feel of that when they have some time to visit that museum.
Yeah, when I prepared the lesson helps for the advanced honor, I recommended that they either go visit that or at least get on their website, because there's a lot of good information that talks about Noah's Ark. It's really amazing when you see it, and when you go through and describe how that really could have happened. Because I'll be honest, when you just Google it right now, there's a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, it's fiction. There's no way it could have happened," but they actually demonstrate how that really could have happened. So, but what about two Bible stories that defy Archimedes' principle of buoyancy?
When the first thing I can think about is when Jesus walks on water.
Exactly. Jesus walked on water. So how much do you think Jesus weighed? Of course, we don't have any pictures of Jesus, but what do you think he weighed?
170.
He was probably at least 150, 180 pounds, somewhere around there. And he stands with feet that are probably a foot long and 3 or 4 inches wide. He should have sank, just like any of us would have sank. But he wasn't displacing any water, but yet he was able to stand on top of water. So that was a true miracle, because it didn't comply with any of our physics that we have. What about another story? I'm thinking of another one, but there may be more than one more.
That apply to Peter too?
That's the same story.
How about the axe that the head of the axe that floated on water?
Exactly, the axe that floated water. So which is heavier, a volume of steel or a volume of water? Which is heavier?
Steel.
It's the same volume.
Steel.
So by Archimedes' principle, that steel should have sank, right? But when they prayed, that steel floated to the top like it was less than air, or I'm sorry, less than water. So also when we get together, I want you guys to think about these stories and at least be able to give maybe a devotion to the club and talk about those stories and why it's important, that it's interesting that they defied the physics, okay? So think about those stories. If each of you could at least do 2 of them when we get back together, that would be great. Or maybe while you're stuck at home, if you could do it as part of your devotions with your family, I think that would be a great way to do it too. So you could focus on one of your family devotions and talk about those stories, okay? Can you all promise to do that for me? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. So if you guys complete the building of the boats and tell your stories during devotion and turn your papers into Edgar, all of you will have earned the basic boat. So if you recall the derby for the car, basically it just says build a car, and it's got some other things, but basically it all involves building the cars. So this is building the boats, and you guys can be as creative as you want, and when you get to race them, but hopefully you guys learn something about physics in the process, okay? So next week, same time at 10 o'clock, we're going to get together, and I want to see you guys show off your boats to me on the Zoom, okay? I want you to show me how your sailboat and your rubber band boats. I'm anxious to see how you guys did those, because I'm sure all of them could look different, and they're up to your imagination is the only limit. So we'll check in next Sunday at 10 o'clock, and then after I see your boats, we'll work on the advanced honor, okay? You guys okay with that?
Glenn, I have one more question for you. It doesn't even relate to this honor, though. Could I ask you real quick?
Sure.
With the prayer honor, has your missionary friends said that they received any emails from us? We emailed them about a week ago and haven't heard back.
Well, that's interesting. I do know that some, Logan and Jorgen emailed them. I haven't talked to them in just over a week, so I'll ask. I'll check in with them and find out.
If you could just ask if they got something from Braden and Owen,
Okay, that's good to know. Maybe you got the wrong email address or something. I'll check and see if they did. If they didn't, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before I let you all go? All right. Appreciate you guys hanging in there, and thank you for piloting the honor. Also, I'll have some worksheets for you guys to fill out on what it was like to do the honor. So I have to take all those worksheets back to the committee, and they want to know what your impressions are. Okay?
Glenn, I have one question.
Yes.
Well, I just got a text from Bianca's mom. Did you say this is being recorded? Can she catch up with it or no?
Yeah, sure. We'll share the recording. Once I figure out how to share it, I'll record. I will save the recording, and then I'm still working on how to figure out how to save the large file. But yeah, once we figure it out, I'll let everybody know.
Okay, that's good.
All
right,
right.
that's good.
Have a good day, and guys stay safe, okay?
Thank you, Glenn.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Leave the meeting.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Mary, can we see your baby?
Sure.
Hey, can I see the baby?
Hold on just a second.
We're gonna see baby Ian.
I see her.
I know.
Jacob. Mom, they're gonna show baby Ian. What? They're gonna show baby Ian.
I'll keep the recording going for a little while longer, so we can all see baby Ian.
Yeah, my message for him was welcome to the world, baby. And
Okay.
Let's show the baby. Grabbing the baby.
I'll go get mine.
Yeah, go get mom.
He's a couple of weeks old. It's pretty good.
Come on over here. There. Let me see.
Oh my goodness! Hi,
welcome to the world.
Your face. There you go.
Oh,
that's
that's
a hair.
Yes.
That's a hair.
Oh, can we
Look
click
at all
on
the
one?
hair.
Oh, lots of hair.
Yeah, lots of hair.
Baby.
Hi, Ian.
Ew.
He's a mini Jorgito.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
look forward to meeting him in real life.
Yeah, hopefully soon, guys. Aw.
I know.
You
Well, we
guys
can't see him right now due to the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's right.
COVID-19.
okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Ian.
Love you.
You.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh.
Okay, all done.
Leave